Barcelona, the city of the Sagrada Familia, the Ramblas, and the Boquería market, is a hot topic. It is one of the most popular cities in the world. Nevertheless, it's not all good news. The city has a serious problem with public safety. Those of you who are watching us from Spain or know the city well may find news stories like these quite common.
Barcelona closes 2023 with a generalized increase in all types of crime. Barcelona, capital of crime.
And no, of course, Barcelona is not Rio de Janeiro, Caracas, or anything of the sort. But in the Spanish and European context, the evolution of this city in terms of the lack of security is worrying to say the least. In the city of Gaudi, an average of 575 crimes per day were reported in 2023, and this figure is growing steadily. Among them, the most common are theft and robbery. In fact, according to Eurostat, Barcelona has become the Spanish capital of robbery, and only Brussels surpasses it at the European level. In other words, if you're going to visit this beautiful city, keep a hold of your wallet. For example, theft, that is, robberies without violence, account for 48.1% of all crimes in the city. That is the big security problem, but VisualPolitik community, it is far from the only one. According to data from the Barcelona City Council itself, more than 27,000 people were arrested in the city, sometimes dubbed Ciudad Condal, in 2023, which is 23% more than a year earlier. But to make matters worse, of all those arrested, a core group of 526 known multi-recidivist offenders committed more than 6,100 criminal acts. That is, 2% of those arrested committed more than 22% of all crimes. And yes, they are still on the streets, because that's how they roll in Spain. And let's see, as you can imagine, all that we are telling you obviously relates to something, and that is precisely what we want to find out here on VisualPolitik. And that is what we are going to look at a little later in this very video. But that's not all. Other, even more serious types of crime have also been on the rise for some time now, generating headlines and giving Barcelona an appalling image and bad publicity, both inside and increasingly beyond Spanish borders.
Barcelona registered 3 sexual assaults a day in 2023.
With all this data, it is not surprising that, according to some public opinion polls, more than 60% of Barcelona residents are afraid to walk alone at night. And that, in a traditionally safe country like Spain, is truly outrageous. In fact, some of the VisualPolitik team was in Barcelona recently preparing some new projects, and the fact is that we had the perception that this feeling of growing criminality is widespread. In the taxi, in the hotel, in the stores, and in the meetings. Every time you asked someone, the answer was always the same. In recent years, the city has become much worse due to theft and other crimes. In the same vein, it is also not surprising that almost half of the women in Barcelona say they feel unsafe at night, fearing sexual assault. And let's see, it is true that the increase in crime is a widespread phenomenon both in Spain and in Western Europe. In fact, in 2023, the total number of crimes committed nationwide already exceeded 2019 pre-pandemic levels by 6%. However, and this is often the catch, not all crimes have the same impact on people and their sense of security. For example, Spain experiences a great deal of crime related to cybercrime, more than 16% of the total. However, these crimes do not generate fear of going out on the street at night or of being assaulted during a robbery. Nevertheless, crimes that do have a direct impact on the feeling of security are more frequent in Barcelona than elsewhere in the country. But why are we talking specifically about Barcelona and not about any of the many other European cities that are also seeing their security levels worsen? Well, you see, one of the reasons is precisely that the statistics indicate that something serious seems to be happening with the foreign population of this city. Take a look.
78.8% of those arrested in Barcelona between January 2023 and December of last year were foreigners. This is clear from the arrest statistics, both by the Urban Guard, city police, and by the Mossos d'Esquadra, regional police.
And of course, the easy, simple thing to do would be to conclude that if in Barcelona the foreign population currently represents 23.6% of the total, and this 23.6% is responsible for 78.8% of the crimes, the immigrants are to blame for everything, right? That the increase in crime in Barcelona is directly linked to the increase in the foreign population. This is, in fact, what is claimed by some political groups, both national, regional, and local. If we were to do the same, we would likely get a lot of applause. However, I'm sorry to say, we are not like that. Here the mistake is to stay only in the statistics, to look for the causality in the correlation, and not to really try to discover the reasons. And before some of you jump on my case, let me tell you about other examples from other similar cities. In Madrid, with more than 100,000 more immigrants than Barcelona, crimes committed by this population account for around 30% of the total, 48 points less than in Barcelona. That is to say, considerably less than half. There's also the case of Paris, where the percentage of immigrants is similar to that of Barcelona. However, according to data provided by Macron himself, crimes committed by foreigners account for 48% of the total. As you can see, both cases are far from the 78.8% of the Catalan capital. So in the European context, the case of Barcelona is striking and must be a response to something else. So the question seems clear. What on earth is going on? Well, pay very, very close attention because we're about to give you all the details.
Broken windows.
There are many theories that try to explain why in some cities, crime suddenly starts to increase with seemingly no end in sight. Some blame the lack of police, or that the police are too soft. Others blame the laws and politicians, and others blame the arrival of irregular migrants. These are reasons for all tastes. But what if there was something else that we rarely take into account? You see, one of the theories, not exactly new, of why a city can end up falling into decline is precisely in the public space, in what surrounds us. Yes, you heard me. And let me stress, we don't want to suggest that other reasons do not play a role, but there is one theory that explains to a large extent why cities deteriorate. We're talking about the theory of broken windows. The idea gained traction in the early 1980s with American criminologists James Q. Wilson and George L. Kelling. Their thesis was very simple. If you leave a window unrepaired, more broken windows will gradually appear. However, much earlier, in 1969, experiments on this phenomenon had already been carried out. For example, psychologist Philip Zimbardo tried leaving 2 cars parked, one run down and in poor condition in the troubled Bronx neighborhood of New York, and the other in perfect condition in the wealthy California city of Palo Alto. The car in the Bronx was quickly ransacked. No surprise. The Palo Alto one was undamaged for weeks, but when investigators purposely smashed the windows, before long the car met the same fate as the one in the Bronx. It was completely ransacked. The idea of this experiment was to demonstrate that it doesn't matter whether we're talking about affluent or depressed neighborhoods. If in any of them there are elements that degrade the environment, then crime and vandalism skyrocket. Obviously, all this talk about broken windows is just an example. The point is that if, for example, graffiti, dirt, or unrepaired damage to public furniture suddenly appear, then the wave is likely to spread like there is no tomorrow. Suddenly, the social norms of coexistence disappear. And VisualPolitik viewers, Barcelona, like many other cities, has had many broken windows in recent years. We're talking above all about the abandonment of public space and everything that implies coexistence in society. Graffiti, urban furniture in poor condition, streets full of dirt, traces of narcotic consumption, illegal squatting in houses, and even poor street lighting. All this has been increasing in recent years in Barcelona, in some neighborhoods, much more than in others. And at the same time, crime rates have been rising. This occurred especially during the mayoralty of the recently replaced Ada Colau.
The problem of dirtiness in Barcelona becomes the biggest front for Colau. Drugs, syringes, and dirt. The daily life of the gardens and playground of a school in Barcelona.
It's true, in all cities there are corners with these types of problems, but in Barcelona, the situation extends to almost entire neighborhoods, as for instance in the central neighborhood of El Raval. In some cases, the situation has gotten so out of control that it has become common to see people urinating shamelessly in the street in broad daylight, right in front of the frustrated gaze of neighbors and tourists. Well, this type of behavior typically ends up having a strong influence on people's behavior, and with it, on crime rates and feelings of safety. In other words, neglect on the part of the public authorities generates more neglect on the part of those who live in the city. Has it ever happened to you that you are in a very clean place and you are very embarrassed if you drop a piece of paper on the floor? Well, that's just what happens in reverse too. Imperfection begets more imperfection, and so the problem snowballs. Take last year, 2023 for example. Barcelona came to be considered by the Association of Consumers and Users of Spain as the 6th dirtiest city in Spain, and second among large cities with more than 500,000 inhabitants. It was surpassed only by Seville.
A cockroach is given to Ada Colau at the Festis de Gracia to denounce dirtiness.
But in Barcelona, it's not just about filth. Two of the broken windows that are of the most concern in Barcelona are the habitual consumption of drugs in the streets and the illegal squatting in dwellings. In this vein, the district of Ciutat Vella, or the Old Town, which is where El Raval is located, is the setting for more than 22% of all crimes committed in the city, despite the fact that this area accounts for little more than 4% of the territory and is home to only 6% of the city's population. The feeling of lack of control by the authorities, and in many cases even sympathy for certain types of crime, also explain much of the decline that Barcelona has been enduring for some time now. A clear example is occupation. That is a particularly Spanish concept. You see, Spanish-style squatting basically consists of entering a house, changing the locks, and living there for free for a few years. Squatters often choose supposedly empty homes, such as second homes or bank foreclosed homes. Of course, it doesn't matter. All of those homes do have legitimate owners. Then, in other cases, instead of forcing their way in, there are people who enter as tenants, and soon after stop paying rent and refuse to leave. In most countries in the developed world, doing this would mean immediate eviction as soon as the landlord calls the police. In Spain, however, it's not so simple. And in this matter, the country is, once again, an international exception.
Squatters. The time it takes to evict a squatter in Spain has increased. The average period of verbal proceedings and appeals reached 20.5 months in 2022, according to the CGPJ. Experts call for urgent regulatory changes.
In Spain, in some circumstances, it can take up to almost 2 years to be able to evict by court order the people who have occupied your property. And take note, because if the squatters are declared at risk of social exclusion, then the eviction may take even longer. Perhaps the most surprising thing is that given the problem of the high price of housing, a result of the strong restrictions that exist in the country to build more houses has meant that from some social and political spheres, the squatting movement is seen in a positive light. And take a guess who was a housing activist and one of the main defenders of squatters? Exactly, the former mayor of Barcelona, Ada Colau.
The Barcelona court calls Ada Colau to testify, accused of supporting the squatters.
In fact, Colau herself lived as a squatter for a while before becoming mayor. Yes, strange, but true. Given all this, it's not surprising that Barcelona became the squatting capital of Spain, and probably also of Europe. The figures speak for themselves. Take a look. And while Catalonia is the region with the most squatters by far, Barcelona is the Catalan province with the most squatters, more than half of all those in the region. And check out the trend.
Squatters in Catalonia increased by 82% in 6 years. They are concentrated in the metropolitan area of Barcelona, which leads all statistics.
So what is the underlying problem, and what does it have to do with crime? Well, you see, the problem is that many of the people who squat in Barcelona are not exactly peaceful, struggling families in need of a roof over their heads. They are much more problematic people. In fact, many of these homes are used for drug trafficking and prostitution. They are also sometimes used as drug flats, that is to say, apartments where people go to buy narcotics and often consume them on the spot. These are perhaps the most serious and difficult to solve broken windows in Barcelona. And without a doubt, as long as there are no legal changes at the national level to put an end to the squatting issue, this will not cease to exist. Even so, we are not finished yet. The increasing crime in the Catalan capital also has other aspects that are, let's just say, a bit more controversial. As we said before, there are many voices that blame the increase in illegal immigration of non-Westerners as one of the clear causes for the drift of criminality and deterioration in the city. But is this true? Well, let's take a look.
Immigration issue?
If there is one thing that almost all sociologists and criminologists agree on, it's that poverty is one of the main generators of crime, especially if we're talking about poverty without hope of improvement. Therefore, in the places where there is more poverty, there tends to be more crime. Well, although Barcelona is a reasonably wealthy city, it is also one of the European cities with the largest pockets of poverty. In fact, more than 20% of the population is at risk of poverty, and a significant chunk of that 20% are foreigners. No less than 70% of non-Western immigrants immigrants are in a situation of social exclusion. This is something that particularly affects the youngest. Many of them arrive alone, undocumented, and without the possibility of having their background checked, as is the case, for example, with regular immigration. Obviously, this has an undesirable effect, which is that some end up opting for crime to try to achieve a standard of living similar to that of the local population. Meanwhile, other possibilities that are widely considered are social policies that are based on giving direct aid without having to work and develop skills, as well as policies that concentrate many foreigners in social housing that end up becoming ghettos. This is a well-known phenomenon in Europe. Here on VisualPolitik, we already told you some time ago about the examples of Sweden and Denmark. We'll leave you the link below in the description. The problem with these policies is that many newcomers show no interest in integrating into local communities or seeking formal jobs. In fact, they often limit themselves to interacting with others from cultures similar to their own. Even so, the opposite is also true. Many illegal immigrants do not receive any kind of public assistance, which means that they end up in a serious situation of exclusion that becomes the perfect breeding ground for criminal groups. In other words, it's all or nothing. If subsidies do not actively promote integration and entry into the labor market, the problems multiply. But if nothing is done, you get a similar result. Because, make no mistake, if you can't work, for instance, because you don't have papers, the alternative to poverty in many cases is this.
The Catalan Macro Mafia, installed in Barcelona. The Mossos, regional police, detected that the men, all between 30 and 35 years old, all from North Africa, who are linked to ATM robberies, led a very high standard of living, much higher than what they could afford based on their income.
There are already signs that the Macro Mafia is trying to establish itself in Barcelona. We're talking about one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in Europe that has been growing for years, since it first appeared in the Netherlands and Belgium. This criminal organization takes advantage of people, mainly North Africans, who are in a situation of exclusion in order to recruit them and lead them to crime. The younger ones are recruited for drug dealing, while older ones commit more sophisticated crimes. And of course, the fact that Barcelona has a major cargo port and a free trade zone through which drugs can be imported from abroad is an additional ingredient. This could partly explain why Barcelona is one of the places chosen by the Macro Mafia to extend its influence from Central Europe to Southern Europe. And although, to be fair, crime in the Catalan capital is not yet, for the most part, organized, the truth is that it has the ingredients for things to get out of control. This scenario could provide the final blow to a city that, as we have seen, has witnessed its crime rates rise sharply in recent years. The question at this point is, will Barcelona manage to reverse this situation? The new local government is taking some steps to eliminate some of the broken windows we have talked about. However, it is not known if it may already be too late. Now, while that's happening, it's your turn. What do you think could be the solution to Barcelona's decline? Do you think the broken windows theory could be happening in that city? Well, leave us your opinions below in the comments and let's start a debate. Now, if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any news. As always, thank you very much for being there. All the best. See you next time.